Two elderly ladies, Dolly and Ruby, were talking about their grandchildren. Dolly sighed and said, "Every year, I send each of my grandchildren a birthday card with a generous check inside. And every year, I never hear a word from them, not even a thank you." Ruby smiled and replied, "I send my grandchildren generous checks, too. I hear from every one of them within a week. In fact, they all come to visit me in person." "Really?" Dolly asked. "How do you manage that?" Ruby grinned and said, "It's very simple. I never sign the checks." A sweet elderly woman named Mabel walked into her local supermarket to buy cat food. She placed 4 cans on the counter and smiled at the young cashier. The cashier frowned and said, "Store policy says I need proof you actually own a cat. They don't want folks buying pet food for themselves," she explained. Mabel sighed, went back home, picked up her fluffy orange cat, and carried him straight back to the store. The cashier nodded, satisfied, and rang up the cat food. Mabel went on her way without a word. The very next day, Mabel returned to buy 2 cans of dog food. Once again, the cashier stopped her and said, "Same rule. I need proof you own a dog." Mabel huffed, went home, and returned with her little terrier. On the 3rd day, Mabel came back holding a small box with a tiny hole in the lid. She set it on the counter and said, "Before I shop, put your finger in this hole." The cashier hesitated, but Mabel promised nothing inside could hurt her. Reluctantly, the cashier gave it a try. The cashier quickly pulled her finger out and made a face. "Ugh, that smells awful," she exclaimed. Mabel chuckled and said, "Good. Now I'd like to buy 3 packs of toilet paper." An Indian named Brown Elk walked into the saloon. He was a giant of a man with a 6-shooter tucked into his belt, so no one dared ask why he was carrying a pail of manure in one hand and a small cat in the other. "I'll have a whiskey," he told the bartender, and after downing the shot, Brown Elk ordered another, then another. Finally, after his 4th drink, the Indian pulled out his revolver, fired several shots into the bucket, released the cat, then ran after it. When he caught it, he returned to the bar. "Excuse me," said the alarmed bartender, serving him a drink on the house, "but would you mind telling me what that was all about? My father told me to try and be more like a white man." He answered, "So, I came here to have a few drinks, shoot the shit, and chase a little pussy." Father Murphy walked into a pub and said to the first man he met, "Do you want to go to heaven?" The man said, "I do, Father." The priest said, "Leave this pub right now." He then approached a second man. "Do you want to go to heaven?" "Certainly, Father," was the man's reply. "Then leave this den of Satan," said the priest. Father Murphy then walked up to O'Toole and asked, "Do you want to go to heaven?" O'Toole replied, "No, I don't, Father." The priest looked him right in the eye and said, "You mean to tell me that when you die you don't want to go to heaven?" O'Toole smiled. "Oh, when I die? Yes, Father. I thought you were getting a group together to go right now." Fred mistakenly gets on a bus full of war veterans, but upon discovering it is going his way, decides to stay on for the ride. He sits down next to a guy that jerks his arm to the left every few seconds, accidentally hitting Fred over and over. This really starts to get on Fred's nerves, so he asks, "What the heck is wrong with you?" The reply is, "I got this in the war." Fred finds this pretty annoying, so he switches seats. The next guy he sits by has uncontrollable spastic twitches in his right leg, causing him to kick the seat in front of him and even kicking Fred a few times. So Fred asks him, "What the heck is wrong with you?" Again, the answer is, "I got this in the war." Fred moves again. The next guy, poor Fred, sits by and begins erratically flailing his left hand. Fred says, "Let me guess you got that in the war." The reply was, "No, I got it out of my nose. I can't get it off of my hand." A wife and her husband were having a dinner party. The wife was very excited about this and wanted everything to be perfect to the very last minute. She realized that she didn't have any snails for this dinner party, so she asked her husband to run down to the beach with the bucket she was handing him to gather some snails. Very grudgingly, he agreed. He took the bucket, walked out the door, down the steps, and out to the beach. As he was collecting the snails, he noticed a beautiful woman strolling alongside the water just a little further down the beach. He kept thinking to himself, Wouldn't it be great if she would even just come down and talk to me? He went back to gathering the snails. All of a sudden he looked up, and the beautiful woman was standing right over him. They got to talking, and she invited him back to her place. They were at her apartment a ways down the beach, and they started messing around. Tea got so hot and heavy that he was exhausted afterwards and passed out there. At 7 o'clock the next morning, he woke up and exclaimed, "Oh no, my wife's dinner party." He gathered all his clothes, put them on real fast, grabbed his bucket, and ran out the door. He ran down the beach all the way to his apartment. He ran up the stairs of his apartment. He was in such a hurry that when he got to the top of the stairs, he dropped the bucket of snails. There were snails all down the stairs. The door opened just then, with a very angry wife standing in the doorway. Wondering where he's been all this time, he looked at the snails all down the steps. Then he looked at her, then back at the snails and said, "Come on, guys, we're almost there." Four older men were walking down the street when they turned a corner and spotted a sign that read, "Old Timers Bar, all drinks 10 cents. They exchanged skeptical looks before deciding to go inside. It sounded too good to be true. The bartender welcomed them with a smile. "Come on in, gentlemen. What can I get you? We got a fully stocked bar." Each man ordered a martini. Within minutes, the bartender served 4 perfectly chilled martinis. "That'll be 10 cents each," he said. The men looked at one another in disbelief. They paid the 40 cents, enjoyed their drinks, and ordered another round. Again, the bartender mixed 4 excellent martinis. 40 cents, gentlemen. They happily paid, but by now their curiosity had gotten the better of them. Finally, one of them asked, "These are fantastic martinis. How can you afford to sell every drink for only 10 cents? The bartender smiled. "I retired after years as a tailor in Phoenix. Last year, I won a $125 million lottery jackpot. I'd always dreamed of owning a bar, so I opened this one. Every drink costs 10 cents. Beer, wine, whiskey, it doesn't matter." "That's incredible," one of the men said. As they sipped their martinis, they noticed 7 elderly men sitting quietly at the far end of the bar. They'd been there the whole time. No drinks, no orders, just waiting. Curious, one of the men nodded toward them. "So, what's their story?" The bartender grinned. "They're retirees from Florida. They're waiting for happy hour, when drinks are half price." 2 old ladies, Dolly and Ruby, were talking about their grandchildren. Dolly said, "Each year I send each of my grandchildren a card with a generous check inside. I never hear from them, never receive a thank you message." Ruby replies, "I too send my grandchildren a very generous check. I hear from them within a week after they receive it. In fact, they each pay me a personal visit." "Wow, how come?" remarked Dolly. "Very simple solution. I don't sign the check."